My name is Piotr Kaszowara. Welcome in PostPravda. How long are the Kremlin's arms? Is there any safe place in the world? Is nowadays Ukraine for political dissidents safer than the Western countries? What is the Russian opposition, and does it really exist? What could be a way for Russia in future? All these questions and much more we will ask today to Ilja Vladimirovich Ponomariew. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
First of all, thank you very much for your time, because you just got wounded a few days ago. How do you feel? How is your family?
It's not as bad as it may look like. It was literally a lot of blood, but no, it's better. So there are a lot of wounds, but they are quite minor. I would say they missed. You know, it could have been worse.
And how is your family? Have been
That's fine, thank you. You know, I don't want to elaborate more on that direction because you know, it's a question of security. Yes.
Yeah, I fully understand. And do you really believe that these Shahed drones have been targeting you? Maybe it was just the accident, because there were over 80 drones on Ukrainian sky this night, and this is actually a danger of living in Ukraine right now, that you never know where the rocket or drone will hit.
Yes, you're right. You never know, but first of all, we shouldn't confuse two different events because there were two nights, not one. And in the first one, really, you absolutely correctly said there were several dozen drones, almost 100 drones in Ukrainian skies. And at that time, it was three drones that hit like 100 meters radius of my house. And still, you know, despite that it's three drones, you know, and so close, we still were thinking that it's an accident because we were thinking, you know, maybe they all were just passing by into a certain direction, to a certain military object, and they were shut down by anti-missile defenses. And just because they were all heading in one direction and they were hit from the same AMD, they felt more or less in the same place, despite that it's already pretty low probability. But at least there is such a probability. We just could not believe that the Moscow guys are using such a heavyweight stuff, you know, for me personally. But in the next night, it was just altogether like 7 drones attacking Ukraine, and one of them arrived after the air defense alarm was already put off. And that's why nobody was shooting at that drone. And yeah, I woke up like 1 minute before its arrival, so I can testify that there was no shooting at him. He just arrived to the place where he intended to arrive. The 3 drones that came in yesterday, they were intercepted. And I think that was the reason why they didn't hit the house, and it was like 100 meters, because they were intercepted, but intercepted not so in not such a large distance, but they already produce certain damage because they are powerful, but not that much as the very last one, as the 4th one.
So it actually means that Kremlin knows where do you live.
Oh, yes, we had no illusion that it knows, and we even plus minus know where they learned my whereabouts. That was a warning from Ukrainian security service quite a while ago, but we were preparing for any type of a ground attack, and we had very good security there, and we were even thinking about the possibility of a drone attack, and we installed certain defenses against the drones, but just lightweight drones like the ones that are being used at the front lines, like Mavic types, you know, which can carry like a grenade or, you know, something like this. We obviously were not preparing for attack of a missile or It's Shahed, like heavyweight long-range drone. That's usually been used against the power plants in Ukraine and the other objects of like serious infrastructure. They're very powerful. So we didn't think that they would waste this kind of heavyweight stuff on me.
Yeah, there may be about 40 kilograms of explosives, in this drone. 40
You're an
kilograms.
experienced guy, you know exactly. Yes, absolutely right. 40 kilograms.
It's a lot. It's a lot. 40 kilograms is a lot. It can damage a whole building.
And that's exactly what happened, yes.
And what do you think? Why now?
Most people around me and in general here in Ukraine who have certain information perspective and whatever, they think that it's not a coincidence that it was in the same day with the grant exchange between Russia, United States, Germany, Slovenia, and other countries, because it helped Kremlin to balance the message that it releases certain political prisoners, but still it says, we will kill everybody, who would stand against us. Even you are in the West, have no illusions that if you would do something bad against us, we still know how to find you. And there were examples like this in the past. Skripal, for example, in Great Britain, he was the guy who was exchanged, and still they attacked him because they thought that he was doing something wrong. But my personal feeling is that it's different. Kind of know a little bit how this whole system in Kremlin works. I tend to think that somebody looked at, not somebody, just probably it was Putin himself, looked at what happened to Ismail Hania in Tehran, where it was a successful attack by Israelis on that guy who, like, the enemy of the state. And he said, look, we have a lot of enemies of our state. Why we are not doing the same thing? And, somebody who heard him said, oh, yes, Vladimir Vladimirovich, we have certain ideas, let's try. And he said, okay, let's try. And they tried, and so it just, it's a quick decision. I am very high on their hit list. That's known. He already gave orders to attack me. That's probably the most ultimate decision was made in March this year, and that's the information that we have. So, okay, so they decided to do something, and somebody tried this new method of how to get me.
And I would like to move a little bit to the past, because you had a quite good and rich life in Russia. You have been working for big companies. You were a deputy to the Russian parliament. You could have absolutely normal, good, maybe even amazing life. And I would like to ask you how often you think about it, that you maybe made a wrong decision somewhere. Would you like to change something in your past if you could?
Piotr, I have great life in a great place with great people, with a lot of fun, and it's a life of purpose. When I was living there, it was not like this. So I have a way better life right now than I had at that time. So I made the right decision. Yeah, sometimes it has its caveats and certain dangers, but no, that's a way better life than it was there. Yeah, everybody decides for himself. Everybody has its own coordinates, its own upbringing. They had different parents who were teaching them different things in their childhood. My parents taught me to live this way, and I'm very thankful to them for this, because I think it's the right way.
Or maybe you could change only one thing. Like, for example, it didn't change much that you vote against annexion of Crimea, for example, 445 to 1. what did change except of all your life actually?
Honor. That's the thing, it's it makes difference than 50 years from now. This annexation of Crimea could have been remembered like everybody stood for the annexation of Crimea. All Russians are bad. But now they say that they had certain dissent votes. And it doesn't matter that it was just one person who dared to stand in public, because there were several other friends of mine, three of us who just didn't vote. They were against, but for different reasons, they couldn't press the button. But they still were against this, and that saves the honor of the whole nation, I think.
And many people who know Russia, who has been living in Russia, who are Russians, but they are against Putin, they are very sad actually, because for many, many years from the 90s, we saw Russia changing the direction. We saw Russia developing a lot. We saw the minds of the Russians changing as well. And I would like to ask you, when did you realize that the world that you knew doesn't exist anymore?
I don't know. Probably a lot of such insights and such revelations came to me when I already happened to be in Ukraine, because there were a lot of perspectives in Ukraine which are different from what they were in Russia. And you should understand how interlaced the histories of these two nations are, and how interlaced is our culture and the religion and our relatives and everything. So a lot of things that I found out in Ukraine were a bit of a shock to me, because certain people, certain personalities, certain events, which I was taking as events as a foundation, as the pillars of Russian history, of Russian civilization, of Russian way of life, or have a different perspective if you're actually looking at them from the proper angle, the true historical angle, which you can actually find in Ukraine, and that changed quite a bit of perspective. Because the rest, you see, what you're saying, like the world has changed. I was always involved in foreign policies. My family members in the past, they were involved in foreign politics a lot. My grandfather was Soviet ambassador in Poland for quite a while. So I have this, perspective in family. So I cannot say that I have a lot of revelations, because I always understood that this world is very cynical, and it's a world of interests and not a world of values. And I saw how many times even very reputable nations changed dramatically within themselves. Obviously, the first example that comes to mind is Germany, which during 20th century several times changed completely, from a total horrible state to a very nice and reputable nation. But even countries like United States experienced a lot of very serious internal diseases, political diseases, and they did change quite a lot. The same thing about Russia. It experienced different ups and downs, the moments of glory and full despair, and even crimes that the state committed against its own nationals and against others. We remember the inspiration that was during Revolution of 1917, and then Stalinism, which oppressed the peoples of Russia and Poland is best know what was happening, with Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and others. But it all was coming from the same source originally, and now it's once again the same thing. It's a very bad disease, but it needs to be cured, and the nation would still exist after that. Maybe the country may change in its boundaries. Maybe there would be different nations which decide to split away from Russia, like during Soviet Union collapse. But the majority of Russians would still be Russians, so they need to be cured.
So the dream is not over, you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It's history is never over. It's such a bad theory that was proposed by my good pal Francis Fukuyama once. I really do not understand, how one man can think that the history can be over. It would never be over. Everything, every time things would happen, and always there would be good things and bad things, unfortunately. Like with every human being, like with every society, like with every nation.
And do you think that the relations between Russia and Ukraine can come back somewhere, or you just need to rebuild it completely? Because always when I meet Ukrainians who suffered, for example, from the war, they usually say that no more relations with Russia, no more connections with Russians even.
Well, I obviously didn't live during that time, but I had my ancestors who did, and I read a lot of literature. What was the relationship between Russia and Germany during World War II? We had poems when you see a German, kill him, and that was like written in large letters everywhere. So what? The fascism was defeated by the whole of the world, not just by Soviet Union and nations of the Soviet Union. It was a joint effort. It was defeated, and then it normalized. It took some time, and it was 20 years, which needed to be 20 years of hard society work before Willy Brandt, who was a part of the Allied military fighting against Nazi Germany, being German himself, and the Chancellor of Germany, who came to Warsaw and stand on his knees, and then symbolized the end of this period of normalization. I think the same thing would happen with Russia. It would be a very painful process for Russians primarily. We need to punish the war criminals. We need to reconcile with the rest of society who was supporting them. They have nowhere to go. They are there to stay. So the reconciliation process needs to happen within the nation. But then, obviously, there would be a process of curing the relationship with all neighbors and primarily with Ukrainians. At the end of the day, one thing which I think everybody needs to understand, which is not obviously so visible at this very moment, when there would be a true rebuilding of Ukraine, who will be the main investor in the restoration of Ukraine? It would be Russia. Maybe because you can say it's because of reparations, and pressure, and obligations and everything, but still it would be Russia. And still there would be a lot of Russians coming to Ukraine to help to rebuild the country. Again, it's inevitable. And I think that would work a lot towards this reconciliation and fixing the relationship. The scars would bleed for a very long time, but historically it would be very short period, and things would get back to normal. Just we need to punish the originators of this war and make conclusions, and it has to be properly taught in the schools. The whole system, again, like in Germany, needs to be targeted in overcoming the consequences of the war and treating the society to normalize it.
And how big in this process could be the Russian opposition? And actually, this is my next question. What is the Russian opposition? Is it probably impossible to say that this is some kind of a unity?
There will be never unity in the Russian opposition. We should stop dreaming about this. It's impossible. There are fundamentally different approaches and fundamentally different dreams. Yeah, the opposition is a carbon copy of the nation itself. It's no different. That's why it's the same percentage of people who are imperialist in Russian opposition, the same percentage of people who are conformists, just for different people. And they just happen to be in different circumstances in life. They were rejected by that system, but they desperately trying to find another one, another bosses, another idols whom they pray, another sources of income, another countries which they are ready to serve. But there are other members of the opposition, which we prefer to call not the opposition, but the resistance. There are people who are fighting at the front lines, where there are people who are fighting in the home front. There are people who are spilling their blood and actually fighting Putinism and putting a lot of risk. There are people who are ready to sacrifice themselves to liberate not just the Russian nation, but all other nations who are within Russian Federation. So people are different. You should never generalize, but you should support those whom you like, whom you share your beliefs with. It's just the recent example with this bloody exchange. I am extremely happy that several people whom I know well and who I know are really committed enemies of Vladimir Putin, that they got released from the prison. But what was their first saying that they started from? They started, okay, so let's relax sanctions pressure on Russia. And that's like what was spread all across the world. So for Putin, as they say, okay, so I got the killers and there would be more murderers joining my ranks because they know that they would be rescued and that they would not be punished properly for what they have done. Plus, additionally, these people who are considered to be my enemies, they would promote my own agenda in the world. I don't want to blame Vladimir Karamurza or Ilya Yashin or Andrei Pivovarov for saying what they are saying. They are coming from prison. They have their angle of view, which was produced there. They spent most of recent years in that prison. Obviously, it affected their view, but the damage is done. And now in Ukraine, again, it's a new wave of people. We were saying that there are no good Russians. And it affects even us, people who are fighting and who never thought in the way what those guys are saying. I think, maybe they would change their position, but we all have to be very responsible and very cautious about what we do and what we say.
So I believe you don't, as I understand, you don't agree with Vladimir Karamurza, who said that the Western sanctions shouldn't target the ordinary Russians.
I think that we should increase the sanctions pressure on Russia as much as possible. Obviously, I don't want sanctions that are targeted on ordinary Russians. That is wrong. They should be targeted on the regime. But you cannot target the regime without inflicting pain in ordinary Russians. It's like the way when you treat cancer and you take this, chemistry treatment, it's poisonous for the whole of your body. You're getting sick, you don't feel well. It's all the cells in your body which are affected negatively, but the most negative impact comes on the cancer cells. The sanctions is the same thing. They are toxic for the whole of the country. They prevent the growth of the nation. They inflict a lot of internal pain and uncomfort. But that's the only way how we can affect the leaders. Obviously, there is a way to affect them physically, and that's what I fully support, because they are shooting at us with drones and missiles. Why we are not shooting back on them? Ukraine would love to, but the West prohibits, and that's also a mistake. But sanctions, they still need to be inflated, not decreased, and that's very important. In general, I think that the motivation of our guys that were giving the press conference there, they still were thinking like they're talking to ordinary Russians, but they are not being heard there. There are no tools of communications. There are no channels of communication. What they would say would be published on Western media. It would be published on Facebook, which is currently restricted in Russia. So whom would hear them? They would be heard by the Western politicians who are making decisions on sanctions, and they would be heard a lot in Ukraine. And in both cases, it would be very negative, but they would not be heard in Russia. It's an illusion.
Some Western politicians saw Alexei Navalny as a new leader of Russia, of Russian opposition, but he didn't oppose the annexion of Crimea, for example, as you did. Like, what do you think is the difference between you and Navalny, for example?
I think that the West and just anybody, journalists, should stop thinking in terms of let's find the new good leader for Russia. It would be done by Russians themselves. Russians would decide who is the good leader or own leader. And best of all, if there would be no leaders, if there would be a collective leadership, it would be a parliamentary structure, a very competitive, and that's how we design future Russia at Congress of People's Deputies, the shadow Russian parliament. We want actually to do everything to prevent that there would be no president, no Tsar, no big boss, no Führer. Our approach is actually 180 degrees different from this, eine Volke, eine Führer. We want to have many nations and many leaders. And that's how the situation can be actually healthy. And that's how the sustainable nation and sustainable peace could be built and achieved. We shouldn't look for a messiah. We should support certain action. We should support certain strategy. We should support certain vision. And who is ready to join that vision? Who is ready to join that fight? Who is actually undertaking some action? That's for Russians to decide.
So do you think is it possible to divide power in Russia? Because I've been talking once to Professor Nikolai Karpitsky. He's a philosopher from Siberia who also had to escape from Russia in 2015, and he said that he believes that the only way for Russia is to divide power, to put more responsibility on the people in the regions, for example, and take it away from Moscow. Do you believe this is possible? This is a good way?
Yeah. Yes, I share exactly the same view. I believe in the power of the local communities. In general, I'm left-wing person, so my ideal is self-governing local armed communities. That's like the way how I think the government should be constructed, with direct democracy and stuff like that. I obviously understand there is a lot of time and way to go to achieve this ideal, but nevertheless, we should do our best to distribute power to the municipalities and to the communities. I think that would be our first step. That's in our transition plan that was adopted by the Congress is the fundamental cornerstone. We were learning a lot how it was done in Poland after the transition, after the roundtable process. We took a lot from that example. In the new constitution, the same provisions, so as much self-governing as possible, as small central state as possible. The true federalization.
Do you see yourself as a future president of Russia?
Definitely no, because I just said to you that I see that there would be no future president of Russia. We eliminate the position of president. We eliminate presidency as the thing which actually makes Russia ill. I would love to be the chairman of the transitional parliament, which actually finalizes the constitutional design of the country and the basic set of laws, so that the country can develop. And then I would rather focus on the judicial reform, because I think that without proper rule of law, without a working court system, and starting from the Supreme Court, I don't think that the country can develop. And never in our life in Russia there was a stable working judicial system.
Probably to change the presidential system, you have to find a president first who will change it, yeah?
No, vice versa. Why? It would be a miracle if you would find a person who say, okay, I'm the president, but I want to abolish the presidency. No, yeah, I say just psychologically, I can be such a person, but I don't want even to create a temptation. We shouldn't kill one dragon to produce another one. No, from the very beginning, because it would be the revolutionary process. So why do we need to preserve the presidency? We can start from the very beginning, from the parliamentary system. It just needs to be properly designed, and that's why some people are making laughs at us, saying that okay, in your parliament, you pretend to be a real parliament, you pretend that you are actual lawmakers, you are pretending that you are passing the laws, which you pretend are the laws, but they are not the real legal acts, and they would never be such. No, they are mistaken. I think that the full set of the future layout of the Russian legal system needs to be prepared in advance, because then there would be no time. It would be a revolutionary process. There would be a lot of interest. There would be a lot of struggles and deficit of time all the time. And that's why the system that would be designed under such circumstances would be very flawed. That's why it needs to be prepared in advance, and that's what we are doing now with the best experts, with international cooperation and observation, and a lot of debates, and very thorough and very thoughtful process.
And Khodorkovsky, Kasparov, do you see any cooperation between you all?
Well, look, we are keeping in touch. Khodorkovsky I can call personally a good friend, but the political interests are totally different. The political strategies are different, and there is an obvious competition, not from our side, but rather from their side. Everybody wants to be recognized by the West as the legitimate representatives of Russians, but all Western politicians are asking, why should we recognize you? What's so different about you? That you are so well known, you have so many viewers on YouTube. It's not enough. The legitimacy is coming from the election results and from armed forces that are loyal to you. So we have armed forces in Ukraine and in the home front, which are actually fighting. And we have the legitimacy in this Congress of People's Deputies because it's made of the people who were elected during the internationally recognized elections in Russia when they were still present. Yes, you know, it was a while ago. It's not fresh elections, but at least there is something. And this is something that nobody else has, and that's why obviously it generates a lot of jealousy. And we're always saying, you know, join this effort and join this fight and help people who are at the front lines, and let's be equals, but let's work on the common goal, on the common cause. But that's not how it works usually in politics, unfortunately. And that's why I say that, to me, the attempts to unite Russian opposition are totally futile.
And some experts, as Professor Alexander Motyl, for example, from Rutgers University in the USA, they see a trouble in the Russian opposition movements in general during the history. As he wrote in one of his texts, there is a common way with the cruelty. Every change, every revolution in Russia was bloody. So in the place of cruel rulers comes some other cruel rulers, actually.
He has his point, I would say. He has his point. You see, there is such a Russian proverb or saying that we Russians, we start slowly, but then we ride fast. And that is actually a truthful statement, and it's very applicable to a political process. Russians tolerate the political abuse for a very long time because it's a very large country. And always there are different illusions and attempts to find a solution in a peaceful way. And when it's not happening, then it comes to a huge wave of violence. And that's unfortunately a direction where it goes to at this very moment. I always was a very peaceful politician. So it was quite clear for me that it's going in this direction a long time ago. And I'm speaking about this for 20 years already. We created like the most radical left-wing movement, Left Front, back in 2003. Because at that time I was a member of the parliamentary party and was running for parliament, but it was clear for me that it's a very large chance that there would be no elections in the country, and that the political system would actually become fictitious, like it is right now. But you know, I think that I used many opportunities. I tried to. But it didn't work. And now there is only one way, is a revolutionary approach. And so what can we do? You can either tolerate this regime, which is getting worse and worse. It's moving from authoritarianism to totalitarianism, and it's now starting to threaten the world with the nuclear arms. And I think that with 100% certainty, after like whatever ceasefire, like whatever stop fighting in Ukraine, they would turn their attention to Poland and Lithuania. I think it's absolutely inevitable. I think that they would try to confront NATO because that's what Putin's ultimate objective is to destroy NATO. He is not about conquering more land, but he is about destroying his political institutional enemies. That's what he wants to achieve. So we better do something about the revolution rather than sit back and wait for the large war to knock at just another doors.
And what about Daria Dugin, the daughter of the Putin's philosopher? Because you actually supported the deed made to her, yeah?
Mhm.
How much
Yeah,
have
so
you been involved? This is actually my question because this is still not clear.
no, look, I answered this question many times. So there is a group in Russia, and it's still there, and it's still doing something, but sometimes a little bit less high profile for different reasons. Not taking the responsibility because we have a lot of pushback from the West about this, and that's why everybody who helps the group, ask, to keep profile low. They made the decision on what they want to do, to whom they want to do it, and about methods how they want to do it. But because we were acquainted for a while before that, and they asked me to be their envoy and the speaker and explain to the world what they are up to and what's their rationale, and that they are no terrorists, and that they would never turn to terror methods, but they would fight all collaborants, all the warmongers, all people who are part of this Putin's war machine. To my knowledge, they were not targeting Daria Dugina exclusively. They wanted to hit both Daria and her father. They were supposed to be in the same vehicle, but by some miracle, father just changed cars shortly before that happened, and they didn't know about this, and the bomb went off. But Daria Dugina was not an innocent lamb at all. She was a very high-profile operative. She was the person who was part of organizing of a large assassination of Azov fighters, which were held in captivity in Donetsk region when there was a arson, a fire, and several dozen Azov guys died, which was a war crime. Daria was behind that. That's why when some Putin verstehers are trying to communicate that that's a lady, a journalist, and whatever, that's simply not true. She was as dirty as these generals who are pressing buttons and shooting missiles on Ukrainian civilians. She was a war criminal.
And you also said once you support diversion and partisans burning mobilization points in Russia, for example. Is it only to scare people to not go there, or you see any something deeper in it?
No, you see, these urban resistance activities, or again, in Slavic languages, we do understand as a partisan activity, but in American, it sounds different. That's why usually in English I'm calling it urban resistance, but yeah, we call it partisans. Home front resistance. So it's like French resistance movement. It's a very similar thing. By the way, by scale, it's already larger than French resistance was during World War II. But in general, it constructed in a similar fashion. So in that time, it was England who was supporting French resistance fighters. There was de Gaulle and his official military men who were doing some organizational efforts in how to structure it. But then there was a lot of grassroots groups, very decentralized, which existed in France, on the occupied territories, which were doing their job. The objective is dual. First of all, there are just simply military objectives. So our guys, they take part, for example, in coordinating, navigating the attacks on refineries, because you need to have somebody on the ground to be able to make a precise hit. Otherwise, you would not hit the particular unit that you want to hit, and that it would not be efficient. So that creates a lot of damage to Russian war economy. It's obviously it's not catastrophe for Putin's regime, but it's painful. It's painful. We altogether, during a series of strikes on the refineries, we managed to cut down 10% of Russian output for oil products, which is significant, billions and billions of dollars. There were other types of attacks. There were attacks on, for example, military bases. There were several expensive planes destroyed, so stuff like that. Again, that's something which in the situation when Ukraine has no long-range missiles to be able to attack things on the Russian territory, the only thing that can be such an attack, is this resistance people who are organizing this or another acts of sabotage. So that's military thing. But for me, besides military, political aspect is even more important. I think that personal attacks on the key figures of the regime is even more important than the attack on the refinery. I remember the panic that was spreading within the Russian propaganda people after Dugin and Tatarsky and Prilepin. And it's too bad that we downsized that activity because of the international pressure that we started receiving. Because that's exactly what we need to do. We need to communicate to Russian elites that they cannot sit back and pretend that it's not their war. It is their war. They are financing it. They are organizing it. They are supporting it. They are the warmongers. So either quit, leave the country, start helping the resistance, start helping Ukraine, but stop supporting Putin's war economy. Or understand that you are the target and you could be next. And that you cannot say that, I am just, running some factory that produces steel for the shells, but, I don't care how the shells would be used. It's not my decision whom will shoot this shell and to which direction of the missile or where the explosive would be used. No. You are in charge, you are responsible, and you should pay the consequences.
The flag on your background, it's not just the accident, I believe, yeah?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
What is this flag? Because some people may not know actually what is it. Because I can maybe give a small explanation. So we miss the red on this flag.
Yes, it's a Russian tricolor without red. Here it's supposed to be red, but we consider it to be blood, and we kind of washed it out. And that was at the beginning of the large-scale invasion in 2022 in February. It's a modern artist from Germany, Russian, obviously, a modern artist who lives in Berlin. She produced this flag as an artistic gesture. And it was accepted by all branches of Russian opposition, very rare case when everybody liked it. Our resources were the first to use it, but nevertheless, it was almost simultaneously accepted by everybody, and that became the official flag of Legion Freedom of Russia as well, and that was great. And in the Russian state has been recognized now as the flag of Legion of Russia, despite that all of the Russian opposition is using this flag. And by coincidence, it appeared to be virtually the same as the flag of ancient Novgorod. And Novgorod in Russia is the cradle of direct democracy. It was the main opponent to Ivan the Terrible, centralized oppressive state. It was eventually defeated by Ivan the Terrible. It was a big massacre in Novgorod, but we always considered Novgorod to be the actual piece of Western culture. It's a real democratic state. It's very often being referred to as Northern Athens. So it's the cradle of Russian democracy. So we are reverting to that origin, trying to build a truly democratic state based on the rule of law.
And what is the mission of the National Republican Army right now? Is that all that you just explained in the last question, or there is something more?
No, yes, absolutely. It's the same, and it's just one of the networks. Right now, there are other resistance networks which are more high profile for again different reasons. It's just that National Republican Army is more focused on these personal attacks. And others are doing all the different things. The largest home front network is the one which is associated directly with the Legion, which was actually like created by the Legion Freedom of Russia, because it was created by applicants who couldn't join the Legion, like physically coming to Ukraine to the front, but who stayed home. But in coordination with the Legion, they're organizing certain activities back in Russia. Sometimes it's some minor things like railroad communication cabinets. It's like the simplest task that that people are receiving, just to test their capabilities. But then there are all these things like refineries and military bases and derailment of the military cargo trains and stuff like that.
And do you think is the fight, the war, the only way for Putin's regime to collapse? Right now,
I think there is no other option. There is no legitimate political activity inside Russia, and the level of oppression is that high that people are simply afraid to stand up. They need to have a certain inspiration. Obviously, it would not happen in the fashion that there would be several thousand of men just coming, killing Putin, and then okay, we are living in a new society. No, that would not be the case. It has to start happening something inside Russia. Then it has to be this like Legion and other Russian volunteer groups coming in, and neutralizing the police oppression in Moscow. And then there would be a million people on the streets would actually make the difference and create a revolution. So it's like these three stages which need to come one after another, which to me is the most possible scenario of the change. Just the coup means the system would be preserved. It would be just the personalities that would be removed. Just the military strike, most likely it would be insufficient in terms of numbers that we have. But I don't believe in the peaceful uprising, because so many tries, they all failed without having a military component inside them. It's going nowhere. And again, the recent uprising in Belarus in 2020 was just another example that in such regimes like Putin's regime, Lukashenko's regime, it's simply not working.
And Professor Nikolai Karpicki is saying that the Putin's war against Ukraine is a necro-imperialistic war. Is the war to kill as many people as is possible. What you just said, it was this is the war to fight NATO. To make NATO countries weak. Some businessmen, they say this is the war for the resources, for example, mines, ports on the Black Sea, and maybe the key, lithium deposits in Ukraine. What do you think? What is the real reason? Because we ask for it since almost 3 years, yeah.
No, look, my take is the following. To me, it's a religious war. To me, it's like the war between Protestants and Catholics in the medieval Europe. It's a clash of civilizational approaches. It's the clash between authoritarianism and democracy. It's the clash between so-called Eurasian approach or European approach. For Vladimir Putin, Ukrainians are like traitors. which are like ours. They're like ours. They're the same like us, but they decided to flip and choose Europe instead of us. So they're the traitors, and we need to kill all the traitors and rescue the souls which could be converted into our faith, into our beliefs. And that's why it's so bloody, because, you know, with the religious war, it's irrelevant. You know, it's for the Lord to decide who was right or wrong. But we will kill as many people as possible, and that's what's happening here. Now, obviously, you know, Putin's whole inner circle and he himself are rather kleptocrats than imperialists. Because the imperialism is, I think, is about the control of the land, and I don't think that Putin is very much interested in controlling Ukrainian land. He wants to control the discourse. He wants to control the ideology. He wants that everybody would say, you are the big boss, you know, you are the leader, you are the supreme command, you know, of what we have. But that's not exact control over territory. He would be absolutely happy with Yanukovych still in place, or he had his Medvedchuk, you know, to put in Ukraine as Kiev's leader. He would have somebody in Belarus as well, you know, who can control the territory. But if there would be such a situation when he needs to boost his popularity, he may annex Belarus, you know, because he doesn't care. He thinks it's all the same. You know, it doesn't make a lot of difference. With NATO, yes, I do believe that he wants to NATO to collapse because for him it's a threat. He thinks that the West wants him to be replaced, which unfortunately to me is a mistake. I think that the West wants him to stay where he is. I think that the West prefers known evil and a stable situation. I think that the West is more afraid of the changes than of him staying in power. But Putin does not believe in this. He thinks it's a disinformation. He thinks that the West has a genuine objective of removing him from power. That can be really painful for him physically. So that's why he is fighting.
So where Putin will stop?
He would not stop. Putin would be stopped only with a bullet, with a rope, with a grave. He would not be stopped otherwise.
So you don't believe in any negotiations with Putin?
It's useless. No, you can definitely achieve certain temporary objectives. Like you could negotiate it with Hitler in Czechoslovakia and buy 1 year. But then it would come back. And the repetition of 1939 for Poland, it's not very far away if we are not stopping him now.
If we will buy 5 years, or Ukraine will buy 5 years, maybe he will die, then someone will replace him, for example.
Well, maybe, and I think that that's how many Western politicians are thinking. So let's just buy some time, and then it would be not our problem, but somebody else's problem who at the time would be at power. But you know, the war is such thing where you shouldn't think in terms of buying time. You know, you are fighting here and now, and you are doing your best here and now. And yes, tactically, you can fool your enemy for a temporary relief. But then you should have a very clear plan of what you would do during this temporary relief. And right now, there is no such plan on the table. You know, I would be advocating myself for such a plan if I would understand that, okay, so the world wants like 3 years, but during these 3 years, the focus would be on removing Putin from office and destroying Putinism as a political system, and all the resources and efforts would be driven in that direction. Then I would be the first to say, okay, let's do ceasefire, but let's focus on that direction. But that's not something that would happen. The other way around. As soon as ceasefire would happen, people would just forget about the problem, and then they would wake up when you would hear the explosions in Suwalki corridor.
Do you feel sometimes maybe you are addicted to risk after all these years and everything you are doing?
So what? We're at war. Well, I think that my friends at the front lines, they risk more. Our friends in the home front, they risk even bigger, because then you never know when you would be seized and what kind of tortures you would be exposed to in the prison. So no, I think that it's all fair.
Is it hard to be a Russian nowadays?
No, you know, it's, we don't choose our nationality, our ethnicity, the time when we live. We just have to do what we have to do at our place, and that's what I'm doing. I have a lot of perks of being a normal Russian here in Kiev. You know, people love me here. I enjoy their love. But yeah, for many Russians, it's a problem. But maybe they should ask themselves why it's such a problem for them. Maybe they should change their position, and maybe then the problem would vanish.
So who are you? Who do you feel you are?
Russian resistance fighter.
And do you feel free?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Here in Ukraine, I'm absolutely free. No, I obviously, I'm sometimes not physically free because of, again, security threats, and I am very much sorry because I have to fight so much with my peers in the Russian opposition and with some Western politicians who don't want to accept the truth, who wants to stay low, and who don't want to take the fight. But okay, it's a political process. You have to convince people that your position is right. And to me, the whole historical process putting some wind for my ship to sail.
And do you have your own shelter, or did you lose it? Like asylum?
We have plenty. We have plenty. So again, that's the rule of the game.
But I mean, like a bit maybe mental shelter, you know, like a place
No,
where you
I'm
can go and just be yourself, be quiet.
my mental shelter is with my family and when I'm traveling. That's when, even when I'm doing it for work, I have no time for relaxation at all. I don't have any vacations for many time already, but still I am traveling a lot, meeting with different people, again, promoting the cause. And this traveling is a big relaxation for me in general. But we need to win. We need to win, and then we can go back to a little joys in life.
How do you sleep?
Like a log.
And are you afraid?
No. No, like I'm a normal person. I am cautious, but I'm not afraid, right? So I know that I am at war. You know how the soldier feels. Yes, the enemy is shooting at you. I know that the enemy is shooting at me. I know that we have a lot of hazards around, but so what? Yes, so that's the rule of the game.
Do you believe in the probably two last questions? Do you believe in the individual, or you believe that the society is more important? Maybe as Vladimir Mayakovsky said, the single person is nothing, only society can survive. Do you believe in this, or?
No, obviously, yes. Again, I am leftist. I do believe that there is a foundation, which is material life and rational interest. And then the rest, is built on top of it. The whole political thing, the whole culture, like everything, it's like Maslow pyramid. And we need to make sure that the foundation is built right. We need to make sure that the society is prosperous, that there is no poverty, that the basic needs of a person are fulfilled. And then you can build that the society would move as a whole into a certain direction. When people are in despair, they can do a lot of crazy things. And right now, people in Russia, they are coming to the front lines to fight for money because their families are in misery. And for them, taking part in this fighting, it's their ticket to a normal life, especially if they are killed, by the way. The worst for them is when they're badly injured and lost some limb or something like that. So then they would become a burden for the family. But their salaries when they're fighting and the compensation when they're dead is what would help their family to move away from misery, from poverty. And that's unfortunately a huge motivation for them to fight. And obviously we need to fix it, and personal initiative means a lot. Personal initiative means a lot in terms of system design. So the role of founding fathers, for example, in America was huge, but they could have achieved nothing if the society would not stand behind them. And in this situation as well, obviously, we need to design the system in the fashion that would benefit them all. Otherwise, if there would be another 1991 and 1993, when there would be a small group of people whom we later learned to recognize as oligarchs who designed the system in their personal favor with the support of the West, then yes, these oligarchs would be well off, but then there would be another war.
And maybe all these values are only the illusion. Maybe the world, as we know, is only the illusion. Maybe we just can't change anything.
We can change everything. I believe in the man. I believe in the person's will. I believe that we all can change everything. If we want, we can travel to stars. If we want, we can change the world. If we want, we can even change our bodies. We can do everything. It's our will. It's just that this will needs to be unlocked, and it needs to be unlocked in the fair fashion. Because usually, when people are talking about unlocking the will, they usually talk about unlocking the will of minority, which starts to oppress the majority and create just another horrible political regime.
Said Ilja Vladimirovich Ponomariew, who was my and your guest. Thank you for the conversation, answers, and for your time.
Thank you so much.
And my name is Piotr Kaszowara. If you want to know more, please follow PostPravda.